Hey, Unity of Springfield. It is nice to have another opportunity to share some ideas with you. Today, I am going to be talking about 10 Ways to Love Yourself by Louise L. This is something that I learned, 15 years ago now. But I have reached a point in my life where, and I don't know if you've ever reached this point or not, but every so often I get to the point where some sort of challenge or some sort of event causes me to evaluate where I'm at and to go back to really the basics, the foundation of, how did I get this far? And that's where I'm at right now. So from middle of January until just recently, I've been having some challenges. I've been taking a lot of Unity classes. Those weren't the challenges, but I think that they sort of brought up some maybe unresolved other issues that I was dealing with. And so when I reached that point, one of the strategies that I have had in my life is to just, kind of give it all up. Like, give up what, I'm believing about a situation, what I'm, just kind of surrendering it all. I remember the first time that this ever happened and how much freedom that I had for me. It was when I was in Bible school. Actually, it was right before I got kicked out of Bible school. And I read the Bible all the way through many, many times. And I was, learning Greek and Hebrew at the time. And I was just very frustrated with some of the things that I was learning. Didn't seem to match up with many of the experiences I was having. It wasn't really lining up. Even, some of the things that I was being taught didn't even really line up with what I was learning about the historical context of the Bible and what Jesus was saying in the Bible, and those types of things were creating this contradiction. And I remember I became very frustrated, and I picked up the Bible and I threw it across the room and I pointed at it and I said, either I don't understand a single word that thing says, or it's all a lie. And I said, but right now my hands are empty, and I held them out just like this. I said, right now my hands are empty. You fill it. And I remember just this ease that came over me by not having to be right, by not having to know anything, by not having to believe a certain way, by not being right or wrong. There was just this overwhelming sense of freedom that I had when that happened. And it introduced me to a whole realm of things that I wouldn't even have been able to embrace or accept if I had continued on the path that I was on. And tremendous amount of healing and a tremendous amount of growth that happened as a result of that. And my hands were definitely filled in with things. And I mean, I'm a lifelong learner. I love reading books. I like taking classes. It's just in my nature to do so. And every so often I have to reach the point where I go, my hands are empty and I have no idea what I'm doing. You fill them. And I just came across that experience again from January up until just recently. And I had to just go, listen, I don't know what to do here. I don't know, but you fill them. And so this time around, it brought me back to some foundational material written by Louise L. I mean, I always am promoting her work. I think her work is phenomenal, but this particular teaching that she has, these 10 ways to love yourself, I believe are such an integral part of how we experience our human journey. And they're such an integral part of our personal growth and development, especially if we're interested in things that are spiritual in nature, expanding our capacity to experience things like love or joy or peace. This really, to me, was the foundation for me to experience spirit in a different way. It was this specific, I can really trace back this specific moment when I learned these things, and I wasn't even sure about them at the time. I was just thinking, well, it isn't going to hurt anything for me to begin to practice these. And so that was the major shift for me. And so as an introduction, so why would we love ourselves? You know, sometimes people think love and vanity are the same thing, and they're not. Vanity is really a fear-based level of consciousness. And I've had conversations, especially with some of my very religious family members, saying, oh, well, you're not supposed to love yourself. Oh, that's just, you know, they just see that as awful. You're supposed to see yourself as a worm. You're supposed to see yourself as, you know, in need of a savior. And, you know, I really believe that is, first of all, it's unnatural. If you really think about it, you know, look at a little baby. And have you ever seen a little baby measure her hips to gain her self-worth? No, of course not. Little babies love themselves. I mean, Louise used to say little babies even love their own feces. You know, they don't know anything else. They don't have any training to stop loving themselves. And you know, I don't know when we've stopped loving ourselves, but you know, it's pretty clear to me when I look at society. And I read things like, you know, what Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself. You know, people tend to forget that as yourself part. When I look at society, I really see the biggest issue isn't whether or not people love each other. I mean, yes, that's an issue, but it really stems from the second part of that message from Jesus. Love your neighbor as yourself. I don't believe that's a commandment. I believe it's a statement of truth that people love other people the same way that they love themselves. People, you know, and if you just talk to somebody for 5 minutes, you realize that people who are very, very critical are often very, very critical of themselves. People who are judgmental have a really big issue when it comes to their own self-judgment. They have this idea of life has to be this way and it can't really be expressed any other way. And we're going to delve into that a little bit more in these 10 steps. But loving ourselves, when we love ourselves, we're really opening ourselves up to God. You know, God, it says in the Bible, God is love. And when we refrain from truly loving ourselves, we're really pushing away the divine flow. And when we get into, you know, every time I've gone back to this particular subject, when I get into the flow of loving myself and I am practicing these things, and there may be other ways to love yourself and you may have your own, but when I'm really practicing self-love, I'm more compassionate toward others. Things tend to go much smoothly in my, you know, they're just in my everyday life, things smooth out. It's almost as if when I'm loving myself, the universe is just on my side completely. Now, the reality is the universe is always on our side completely. God is always on our side. One of the things that Louise Hay teaches is she says, God always says yes. God sees us at our own value, and then we manifest based on that. Now, we also know that there's grace, so we never get more of our, you know, of our error thinking back than we put out, and we always get more good back. So we in Unity, you know, we recognize that there's also grace, but the reality is that God is always saying yes to our level of consciousness. And so this is why loving ourselves is such an integral part of our personal development and of our ability to love other people. And so what are these 10 steps? Well, step number 1, and Louise says, if you get this step, you don't have to practice any of the other ones. They'll come naturally. She says, stop all criticism. Stop criticizing yourself. Stop criticizing others, but mainly stop criticizing yourself. And she says that, you know, we've been doing this for years. We've been criticizing ourselves for years about the same things. Clearly, it doesn't work. You know, clearly our criticism isn't adding to our quality of life, and it's not producing the kinds of changes that we want, especially if you're criticizing your changing body, because our bodies are always changing. But I mean, if you're criticizing your abilities, if you're criticizing your behaviors, you know, the truth is you've always been doing the best that you can with the information and understanding that you have. And we'll get into that later too. But criticism doesn't bring any value to you as a person. It doesn't bring value to your relationships. You know, this idea of, actually, I addressed this in one of the classes that I was doing. I was doing a Bible-based class for Unity. And we were talking about the subject of the devil and evil. And I actually wrote my paper, because each class I had to write a paper for each subject. And my paper on evil, I refused to acknowledge it. And I kept thinking, I don't really care if I get a 0 on this paper, but I even have a little bit of resistance with some of the older Unity teaching and how, you know, we talk a lot about error thinking, but what if we're okay? What if this is a part of our development? What if, you know, and the way we see it, and actually I really like Charles Fillmore's perspective on evil, where he doesn't believe that because it has no power, it's not officially real. It's not eternal, so it's not real. I totally paraphrased what he said, but I read that in the class and I was like, oh, I definitely agree with this. But I wouldn't acknowledge evil as something that I put any kind of belief in. And that sort of goes with this whole stopping all criticism aspect of life, is it doesn't change anything. And we'll get into positive changes with, I believe, the 3rd step. Anyway, yeah. Yeah. So the next one, number 2, don't scare yourself. And this one was always a big one for me. Anyone who's a worrier can relate to this step. You know, I grew up in a family that was very worried. We were very worried about how we were going to feed ourselves, how we were going to keep a roof over our heads, how we were going to clothe ourselves. That was just the way that my family existed, essentially. And when she taught this, and when I was picking this up, I realized, you know, worry and fear, it's just using the imagination to conjure up some future story that may or may not be true, and most of the time isn't true. I remember, I don't remember who it was, but I remember one of my early teachers said, worry is just praying for the things we do not want. And the truth is, this shows up on the list because if you really loved yourself, you wouldn't scare yourself. You would, I mean, think about our relationships, you know, our relationships with our children, because we all have an inner child still. We would not terrify the people that we love with terrifying stories about the future that we don't know if it's true or not. We wouldn't do that. But yet so many of us, including myself for a really long time, did it to myself. Many of us do it to ourselves. And I remember when this first hit me, when I realized, oh my goodness, I'm doing all of this to myself. You know, Louise's biggest mantra is, it's only a thought. Anything that you're experiencing in life is only a thought, and a thought can be changed. Even self-hatred is just hating a thought you think about yourself. And, you know, it's kind of like what A Course in Miracles says is, you know, that to love yourself is to heal yourself, because the source of love, well, actually love is God. And that is, you know, when we do that, we heal, we become whole, we become complete. So not scaring ourselves is a big issue. It was a big issue in my life. It was a major change in my life as well, when I decided I wasn't going to do that anymore. And, you know, there are certain areas that we scare ourselves. Health can oftentimes be a big one. I know for me, you know, I am having an experience, you know, if I'm having an experience that's physical, I immediately think, well, you know, is this the one that's going to take me out? Louise said it this way. She said, oh, you have a pain, and then you begin to immediately plan your funeral, which I could totally relate to what she was saying there. But yeah, we scare ourselves with our health. And, you know, God is our perfect health. The universe provides, you know, life is flowing through us, and life is God, and that is health. And relationships, we scare ourselves in relationships. You know, if we narrate somebody else's thought processes about us. I mean, these are all things that I've done. I'm pretty sure this is not just a James thing. It's a universal thing, especially since I've heard other people that I've talked to about this. They're like, oh yeah, I can relate to that. But yeah, somebody doesn't call and we immediately think, oh, we're unlovable and oh, you know, we're never going to get that relationship or whatever. You know, we scare ourselves. We're telling unnecessary stories and we can't think for other people. We can't put words in their mind. And, you know, that's huge to recognize. Not just, I mean, we all know logically, we are the only thinkers in our mind. They are thinkers in their mind. We all kind of know that logically. But how often do I, although I'm really good about this one, because at this point, I just don't care what people think about me. That's actually useful. I love what Wayne Dyer one time said, your opinion of me is none of my business. And I heard that like 10 years ago and I've used that ever since. I'm like, yeah, I'm just not going to care. I don't, you know, occasionally because I work in a feedback-based industry, occasionally I'll get a negative feedback. And when I first started, oh my goodness, it was awful. I just thought that my world was over. I couldn't work for days. And then I realized it doesn't matter. Like their opinion doesn't matter. So it doesn't define who I am. And that's the biggest thing, you know, that's one thing to recognize. And the other thing to recognize is that we don't really know what people are thinking about us. And most people are actually wondering what we're thinking about them, so it doesn't really matter. And then work and career. People get so worried about, you know, their sense of stability and security being lost. And so they'll, you know, I've had a lot of people coming to me worried, oh, I think I'm going to get fired. And then come to find out it was there was nothing there. There was no problem. And so, you know, we do that. We worry about our sense of stability and security. And really, it's just not recognizing where those things come from. You know, our health is God. And our love, even with other people, that is a manifestation of God. And our stability and security isn't our jobs. You know, our jobs may be the means by which the abundance flows, but that's not our stability and security. That's not our, you know, that's not our source. And so, so that's another thing, recognizing, you know, what is our internal narrative about a situation. Now, sometimes, and Louise talks about this, sometimes we get into those patterns of like running anxiety or running worry where we're just thinking those same thoughts over and over and over again. And she recommends something that has worked really well for me, a switch to image, where we, first of all, what happens is we switch to the right side of our brain when we begin to use visualization. Now, some people can't do this, but, you know, the concept would be the same even if it's just a positive narrative, like an affirmation. I find that using an image is very helpful for me because it switches, again, to the right side of the brain, and it interrupts that pattern of worry. But, so Louise Hayes was yellow roses. Mine is just always a garden scene, and I actually have the same garden scene come up every single time I visualize, and I visualize myself there. And then I just say to myself, you know, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not running this old story, this old pattern. It has no power over me. You know, we do affirmations and denials in Unity. You know, this thought, this worry that I have has no power over me. And then affirm the positive. You know, out of this situation, only good's going to come. So that's, don't scare yourself. And so number 3 is be gentle, kind, and patient with yourself. And this one, I would say when I began to practice this, it is when I started noticing the most significant changes in my life and in my experience of life. And it makes sense. I mean, you know, we all know, you know, treat others how you would want to be treated. But how are we treating ourselves? You know I used to berate myself. I had, you know, I was in conversion therapy for a long time, 5 years, over 3 different programs. And you can build up a lot of internalized resentment and self-loathing in a very short period of time. And I encountered this work right after I left that. And so it took me time. And knowing that it just takes time, this process of growth and loving ourselves takes time. Love is a process that unfolds over time. And we have habits of thinking that we're working ourselves out of. And it takes, you know, daily practice, and it takes, you know, effort to do so. And this is, you know, being gentle, kind, and patient with ourselves is a way for us to really support ourselves like we would support someone that we loved that's trying something new. You know, I know some people have a really hard time just learning new things simply because they have this idea of perfectionism. They don't want to make a mistake, so they just don't do anything at all. And that you really don't go anywhere when you do that. But it's very common. And I actually feel like, you know, the coronavirus, we've learned so much with it, especially along the lines of technology. I've been taking a lot of Unity classes, all of them online, which works perfectly for me because I do a lot of stuff online anyway. I do feel like now, since coronavirus, I've spent way too much time looking at a screen, and I'm ready to not do that anymore. But I really believe that it was a positive for so many people. There's this scripture in Isaiah, and I was reminded of it immediately, like even before anything happened. There's a verse that where Isaiah says, that the hearts of the children must be returned to the parents, and the hearts of the parents to the children, lest the land be struck with a curse. And I don't really believe in the judgmental God. I don't believe in the God of personality or personality disorders. I do feel like sometimes, you know, the God of the Bible from my youth definitely had a personality disorder, but I don't believe in God as a personality. But I do recognize that this coronavirus situation, and I even saw it at the time, that what had happened was we have this whole generation that's just lived off of computers. I mean, I am sort of in the middle. And so I have the generation that's older than me that really, they're not, most of them are not very computer literate. And then a lot of the young people, you know, that are younger than me live their life on a computer. You know, they even before coronavirus, like their primary social outlet was, you know, things like Instagram, Facebook, you know, there's other new ones, but you know, it was social media, constant social media. And what I believe happened with this coronavirus is all of the younger people got shut in, not all of them, but a lot of them weren't able to be as social out there. But the thing is it was just a manifestation of their own insecurities, that's why a lot of people, you know, became really addicted to social media. And it provided a hunger for them to like want more actual community. And the older generation that were computer resistant, they didn't want to have anything to do with technology. They didn't want to learn it. They didn't want to, you know, I tried getting some of the older people in my communities back home into, you know, hey, if we do this technology stuff, it's really going to benefit us. And people were just very resistant. And so what I've noticed in taking Unity classes is that this whole new generation had to learn. They had to sort of like backtrack and learn what all of the young people have been doing because it was their only way. And they recognized that it had value. And the younger people recognized that being social in a physical setting with people face to face has value. And I feel like that's one of the things that we've gained through this. Now, what does this have to do with being gentle and patient and loving with ourselves, or, you know, to love ourselves? Gentle, kind, and patient as we love ourselves. It's all about what we're if we're resisting something. And I feel like that particular story with coronavirus, it shows what our resistance does when we create a division in our communities and in our society. And how, you know, and it also shows the power of spirit to reconcile those and to bring those back together and to really create a whole new system. I mean, I was talking with the minister of Unity of Houston, and he said, I just see this is going to transform Unity. Unity as a whole is going to be profoundly different as a result of what happened. And I just believe that that's true. And so yeah, it is important to recognize that it's okay to make mistakes as we learn. That's just the nature of learning. We're gonna get it wrong a few times, and that's okay. We're gonna, we're not gonna do everything perfectly, and it's a process. And mastery, especially if we want to master something, that's usually a longer process, meditation. I've been meditating for 20 years. I still don't know what I'm doing. I mean, I could probably teach a class, but you know what I mean? Like, I don't feel as though I've mastered anything in that realm, because there's always more to learn and there's always more to grow, but we stay static when we aren't gentle and kind and patient and allowing ourselves to take one step and then another step and then another step. And that's how we get anywhere. So that is that one. And we will move on to number 4, be kind to your mind. And this is all about, what are we thinking? The mind is sort of like a garden, and whatever we plant in it, we will eventually yield a harvest from what we're planting. And a lot of us have planted, some negativity, and we realize that we've experienced that. I remember Marianne Williamson one time saying, through recognizing this, saying, I realized how much power I had when everything I had turned to, she used a word that I don't know if it's appropriate in Unity, so I'm not going to say it, but it is so true. I mean, our minds create our experience. Whatever we choose to think and believe about life does become true for us. Even if it just exists in our mind, it's still true for us. And, paying attention to what we're believing. A belief is just a thought we choose to keep thinking about ourselves or about life. Everything we think or say is an affirmation. I know Louise used to do a pattern interrupt where she would say just that. She said, everything that you're thinking is an affirmation and it will create your reality. Do you want this thought that you're thinking right now to shape your future? And it stopped you and it made you go, whoa, okay, probably not. Or sometimes absolutely. But, being kind to your mind is how are we using our mind? Her recommendations are specifically intentionally using positive affirmations, which is something that we use a lot here in Unity. Understanding the difference between responsibility and blame. So I was a part of a lot of New Age communities throughout my life, and one of the things we talked about was New Age guilt, and it was associated with this process of manifestation because we really are responsible for everything that we experience. And sometimes we can get into the pattern of blame. It's like, oh, I'm not thinking right, or I'm not doing it right. And responsibility is our ability to respond. It's our ability to, accept responsibility and then allow ourselves to make the kind of changes necessary to create a different experience. And so responsibility and blame has no value. It does not help you at all. And so it is important for, in being kind to the mind, to understand the difference between responsibility and blame, because we're not blaming ourselves. In fact, God says yes, meaning that God is not judging us for our thinking patterns. God is allowing us to expand even when we're making mistakes. And so there is no blame. There is no, that goes back to, the criticism aspect of loving yourself. Blame creates guilt, and guilt creates and seeks punishment. And that's how we manifest experiences that contradict what we say we want. And so, another thing that she recommends is relaxation, taking a few minutes every day and just relaxing the body. And this helps us get more into the flow of life. And it allows us to recognize we don't have to be tense all the time. We can just relax and just go through life and flow through life with the process of life unfolding in a natural way. Let's see, meditation. She recommends meditation. Unity has a great meditation class that I took this year, it was earlier this year. But yeah, meditation. One of the things that Louise talks about a lot is sometimes people think that meditation is about achieving a state where you're not thinking, but she puts this in the category of being kind to your mind because it is the nature of the mind to think. And so she recommends, instead of trying to stop thinking, just recognizing your thoughts and letting them pass through, and maybe even identifying them. It's like, oh, there's a loving thought and there's a fear thought, and look, there's a disaster, and, you know, but not emotionally attaching to the thoughts that we're thinking and letting them flow through. And by doing so, we increase our ability to choose which thoughts we want to believe, choose which thoughts we want to maintain in our consciousness. And visualization. She recommends visualization, envisioning, which is just simply using our imagination to create images that are consistent with our own desires and with our own growth and evolution. Number 5 is praise yourself. Speak loving and kind words to yourself. So this is another one I had challenges with, but you know what? I'm almost wondering if everybody has challenges with all of these. Anyway, but yeah, praise yourself. When something good happens, do you go, like mirror work, which is something I'll talk about in a minute, but do you go and say, oh, great job, that was wonderful, I'm so glad we created that for ourselves, so glad I created that for myself, or whatever. Praise yourself, praise your positives, recognize your own value, recognize your intelligence, recognize who you are as a child of God. Recognize those things and praise yourself and honor that aspect of yourself. Honor yourself when you've accomplished something. Honor yourself. And, you know, sometimes, again, this goes back to people thinking that it's vanity. But the reality is that we are worthy, and praising ourselves is associated with our worthiness. And the truth is, we don't even have to do anything to be worthy. We do not need to earn love. We are lovable because we exist. We don't, you know, a lot of people get caught up in, oh, I have to earn this and I have to earn that. But then they even don't accept it and acknowledge that they've done it most of the time. And so this is why this one's so important, to loving yourself, praising yourself, recognizing your own true value, your own true worth, and your worthiness, that you are worthy of all of it. You know, as a child of God, I mean, God is omnipotent and all good. So that means you deserve all good in all ways. I mean, that's a pretty significant you that's out there. So yeah, praise yourself, recognize your worthiness, recognize your deservability. Criticism breaks down the spirit. You know, and a lot of us have criticized ourselves or have received criticisms from other people. But praising builds us up. It makes us stronger. It makes us, it allows us to be more effective us in the world. It allows us to be who we really are in the world. It gives us, you know, an ability to have a purpose and to know our purpose and to know we're on purpose. Those are all things that are derived from, you know, this ability to praise ourselves and to recognize our own true worthiness. So number 6 is support yourself. Find loving ways to support yourself, including receiving help from other people and asking for help when you need it. I know this was a big one for me. I mean, this was a big one for me just recently, where I didn't know how to ask for help, and I was doing a workshop, mastermind, and the message kept coming through: ask for help, ask for help, ask for help. And I don't even think I ever, in fact, okay, so I told my husband, I think I'm going to ask for help. And we've been together for almost 10 years. And he said, oh, good. I've never heard you ask for help before. And I was floored. So this is a big one for me. But yeah, receiving help. And one of the things that was helpful for me was to look at it from a karmic perspective, and that, you know, if we don't receive, if we're just giving and giving and giving and we're not receiving, we actually create a karmic imbalance where possibly we will reach a point where we don't have a choice and we just can only receive. And I don't think any of us want to reach that point. And so allowing the ebb and flow of giving and receiving, like the breath, is so important and integral to our ability to love ourselves. So support yourself and allow others to support you in meaningful and loving ways. All right, so be loving to your negatives. I actually talked about this in another talk that I did when I talked about mirror work. But this is just, you know, we create our negative the negativity in our lives to fulfill some kind of a need. And resisting them, it doesn't benefit us at all to resist our negatives. In fact, it oftentimes gets us stuck in the pattern because the negatives are created out of a need. And so we're essentially saying, oh, well, your need is bad when we're resisting it, and moving to a place of finding ways to meet our needs with methods that are beneficial and help us to grow. I'm actually reading another book by Gabor Mate called In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, which I just started, but there was a quote that I really thought went well with this. When looking at addiction, look at what it does right for the person. Look at what this habit is doing correctly for the person. That's the way to overcome it. And I agree with that because I've experienced it in my own life that, the way to sort of get out of negative cycles is not to berate ourselves. That only adds to the stress and the negativity, but to take a step back and understand that this is a way that we are getting our needs met, even if it's not the healthiest way. And this is actually relevant to other people as well and how we view other people, because there is, in our culture, there's definitely a temptation to see things like addiction as a weakness, or, I've noticed this a lot when I was working with the homeless, where people would blame homelessness on the individual because they were an addict. And being able to see that this was really the easiest way for them to get their needs met. We don't know their story. We don't know if they're, trying to satiate some kind of emotional trauma. We don't know what's going on. We just can see the externals and judge. We can't judge by externals. So I think it's important to recognize this from more than one perspective. Oh, I also wanted to, I skipped over it, but in support yourself, because this is relevant to support yourself as well. Support groups are a major thing that Louise L recommends, is finding support groups or making support groups. And I find it so interesting. So when I'm still only a year old in Unity. And so when I started going to Unity, I just wanted to talk to everybody and find out why they were there and how they got there. I didn't care if they've been there for 50 years or 5 years or 5 minutes. I wanted to know why they were there. And in many of the stories that I heard from people about Unity, I was shocked at how many people started going to Unity because there was a support group there. A lot of people, a divorce support group, brought a lot of our current members in. But I just realized that, wow, it actually made me feel like I really belong, because I've been, part of Louise's work for 15 years, and she's such a proponent of support groups. I've led support groups and masterminds, and so it really resonated with me. And I do believe that when it comes to be loving to our negatives and finding support, that support groups are such a powerful way to help us heal. And it's so interesting that they were such a dynamic way of bringing new members to Unity, even like 10, 15, 20 years ago, or longer. I'm not sure, but yeah, that was a foundational thing that I noticed. A lot of people were saying, oh, I came in because there was this support group and I decided to go to the support group. So anyway, so supporting each other, that's so important. And loving our negatives. She also talks under loving our negatives that humor is often one of the best ways to release our negatives, and that sometimes we just become so serious about a particular situation. We're too serious to be able to overcome it. And that, finding humor in life, or even, watching a funny movie, or, finding those things that get us laughing, because laughter, shakes things up and gets things moving. All right, number 8, take care of your body. And there are many ways. One of them is by paying attention to what we're putting into our bodies. And this can go with addiction. It can also go with food and nutrition. I know Paul's been talking a lot about nutrition and that sort of thing. So we definitely have that conversation going here at Unity. But yeah, paying attention to what we're putting in our bodies. Finding ways to move our body that make us feel good. And I know that this one has always been a big one for me, because there are certain exercises that I've tried that I just hated. And sometimes I would would put so much investment in a specific exercise that, or a specific program, that I would just give up. And it wasn't until I realized that, wait a minute, if I just do the things that I love, like walking, I love to go for walks, and I even like walking on a treadmill. And once I realized that, you know, I really liked doing this, and that I can just do the things that I like, and I can add different things here and there, but just do the things I like. I like to dance. I like to do, you know, those sorts of things. And so, yeah, that's a big one. Making sure our bodies, because our bodies were meant to move, making sure that we're moving our bodies in ways that promote health. Let's see. Number 9, mirror work. So I did an entire talk on mirror work when it was last year. I first started coming to the church. And mirror work is essentially, I have mirrors everywhere in my house, but mirror work is essentially saying to yourself in the mirror things like, I love you exactly as you are. James, I love you as you are. You are perfect. Mirror work can also be, you know, like I said, I have mirrors up everywhere. Sometimes I just walk by the mirror and say, looking good, kiddo. Or, you know, just things that make me feel good about myself, utilizing the mirror in positive ways. In the morning, I will often say things like, you know, I'll look in the mirror in the bathroom and I'll say, how can I make this day a fantastic day? And then I just pay attention to what comes up, and then I do my best to follow those things. So mirror work is a very positive way to love ourselves. The final one, number 10, is willingness. Be willing. And, you know, this is a good thing for issues that we're resistant about. And for example, some people can't look in the mirror and say, I love you exactly as you are. You are perfect. And they have to sometimes go, I'm willing to love you. And some people have to go back to, I'm willing to like you, or willing to learn to like you. But the thing with willingness is almost like an activation for spirit. That God can use our willingness. God always says yes. So God can use our willingness to create and promote positive change as a catalyst for that change. And sometimes I think we want to jump from A to Z and not go through all of the other letters. But the reality is if we want to get to the end point, we have to take the steps to get there. And willingness, just being willing to change. I remember when I was really sick one time, I just laid in bed and I was just like, I'm willing to change. I didn't even know what kind of changes I needed, but I just kept saying, I am willing to change. I'm willing to change. And, you know, eventually it happened. And so, yeah, being willing. Another willingness affirmation that we would consider a denial that Louise recommends is, I am willing to release the pattern in my consciousness that is causing this condition, whatever it is. I mean, it can be different for each one of us. But if we're experiencing something that contradicts, you know, our what we say we want or our desires, saying that affirmation, I'm willing to release the pattern in my consciousness that is contributing to this or causing this condition. What that does is it sort of frees us up and allows the universe to show us where we're sort of like, you know, a bit off kilter, and where we're, you know, focusing on the opposite of what we say we want. And so willingness is the biggest one. And, you know, just to conclude this, one of the things I think is so important to recognize is loving ourselves is really the way that we promote change in our lives. Not only in just personally, but when we love ourselves, we can love others as they are. When we accept ourselves, we can accept others as they are. We don't have to try to change them. We can't change them. You know, I hear a lot of people that, you know, they want to change, you know, their families, or they want to change their churches, they want to change the world. And I'm like, oh my goodness, that's big. I mean, I can barely change, you know, my bed sheets. I don't know, that's just a joke. But, you know, this idea that we're out here to change the world, you know, I really, truly believe that we are here to love the world. We are here to love others, and that love will change them, but it's not really our responsibility to change them. And when we're able to love and approve of ourselves, we can just accept people as they are and put them in the hands of the intelligence of love and let love do it for them. So yeah, we can't really grow for others. We can't learn for others. You know, we can't, all we can do is love. You know, we can't change others. You know, we all want the world to change and other people to change, but the only thing we ever really can change is ourselves. And so remembering that is the reason why I always go back to this work as a foundational work if I feel like I'm bumping up against a wall. And I hope this helped you today. Yeah, and that's it. I hope you have a wonderful day.